Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kevin Galetz, and I'm an Industry Education Coordinator working with the Regina District Industry Education Council and SunWest School Division. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce Kendra Fuglerud, who is the Assistant Registrar of Curriculum and Student Records at the University of Lethbridge. She is the youngest person to ever hold this position at the university. Kendra has small-town Saskatchewan roots, as she is a graduate of Rosetown Central High School. And Kendra's going to tell us all about all aspects of her occupation, but more specifically, the journey she took to get there. Just a reminder before we begin, this session is being recorded and will appear on the RDIEC YouTube channel for you or others to view in the future. We'd also like to request that any students who watch this session go to our website at www.rdiec.ca and complete the student survey that can be found near the top of the website homepage. Completion of the survey gets your name in a monthly draw for a $50 gift card. Again, the website is www.rdiec.ca. And if you have any questions for our presenter throughout or after the session, please type them in the chat box. Once again, welcome, Kendra, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone that's taking time out of their day to watch this either on YouTube or live. It really is an honor to be able to share a bit of my journey working through education with you, because it's been a journey and it's been interesting to be where I am now and how I got here. So thank you very much. We'll just dive in here. So my title officially is the Assistant Registrar of Curriculum and Student Records. It's a mouthful, and to be totally frank with you, not a lot of people know or understand what this is. And it's kind of hard to describe. So I want to break it down for you a little bit differently. I think the most important thing to understand about this type of role is what a registrar is actually, first of all. So a registrar really is the keeper of student records in a university or a college. The registrar at our university has a bunch of different portfolios. So as you can see listed in the PowerPoint here, they oversee student records, which would be your transcripts and your parchment after you graduate. Recruitment of students, retention of students. So retention of students is keeping them throughout the duration of their education. So from their very first day that they set foot in the institution all the way through graduation. That's our goal. Applications. So for those of you that are in high school, if you are thinking of attending post-secondary, you'll have to apply to your institution, and that whole process happens under a registrar. Courses and program registration, getting into the courses and the programs that you want, falls here. The academic calendar, which tells you about the policies and legislation of your courses and your programs. The timetable, which is when your courses are offered. And then the student information systems, which is our IT system, essentially, that houses all of your information, all of the students' information. So that's what the registrar is. I fall underneath the registrar, and I cover a few of the portfolios that are the registrar is responsible for. So myself, I oversee student records, which is again the transcripts and the parchments, the course and program registration, academic calendar, and the curriculum and timetabling. So some fairly large departments that have some really critical roles within our university. At a really high level, my responsibility is to make decisions about processes and projects that happen in these departments. And I help guide institutional decisions. So for example, one of the situations we're faced with right now is making decisions about how we'll deliver courses in the fall. Whether they'll be online or whether they'll be in person or whether it'll be a hybrid of both. The timetabling team, which is one of the teams that I work with, we've got a lot of expertise and knowledge about how timetables work and how to make them work for students. We're using the knowledge and the information that we have to try to help guide the institution in making a decision about how to deliver courses. So that's kind of a real-time example of the type of work and decision-making and guidance that I have to provide. It's important to note too that not all registrars' offices are built the same. So the registrar's office at the University of Calgary or the University of Saskatchewan they're going to have different departments underneath them. So they're not all set in stone. They don't all have to look alike. And often those departments will ebb and flow throughout the years anyways and have different types of organizational structures. So, so this is just an example of what our office looks like, but it's not the same everywhere. Skills. There's a lot of skills that are required to do this job. But I find that a lot of the skills that I need are skills that I've learned over the years. The biggest skill that I think is necessary is communication. We often have to deal with some difficult situations, not always, but sometimes. And so for most people, it's easier to communicate good news or good things or good ideas to people. But we also have to be sufficient at communicating things that aren't maybe as comfortable. So communication is really, really critical to a role like this. Problem solving is also another important role. We always are faced with obstacles or little bumps in the road. And instead of panicking or not knowing what to do, we put our noses to the grindstone and come up with lots of different options of ways that we can solve problems. Change management is another skill that's required. Change can be really difficult for people, and not necessarily just in work, but in all avenues of our lives. So learning how to guide people through change is really, again, a really important skill to have for this role. Project management kind of goes hand in hand with change management. So understanding the different phases of projects that you have to implement, all the different people you need to consult and consider, the different perspectives that need to be considered in carrying out a large project, makes this a really important skill as well. Technical skills are something that are a benefit to this position. So an understanding of our student information systems is really, really important, because our curriculum is actually built in these systems. So although we publish our curriculum and what our programs look like outwardly in our academic calendars, everything has to be able to be built a specific way to be able for us to report things to the government and to other parts of our institution. So understanding how to build the curriculum in our software is incredibly important too. Efficiency, there are a lot of things going on in this job at any given time. So being really efficient with making decisions and consultation is critical. And one of the last skills that I would highlight is time management. Again, it's an incredibly busy job with a lot of balls in the air at one time. So learning to manage time also incredibly critical. Traits. This is maybe a mix of things that I think would make people successful in this job, and maybe some of the strengths that I bring to the job that wouldn't necessarily be necessary to do this job well. So it's a bit of a mix. One of the things that I learned really quickly after entering this role is being resilient. There's going to be times in any job where things don't go according to plan, or people aren't in favor of an idea or a process that you think is the right way forward. So being resilient to criticism and to things that maybe don't work, you know, picking yourself back up and getting back to the drawing board and trying again is something that's important. You need to be a people person. You have to work with tons of different people, thousands of students and hundreds of employees and colleagues. So being able to get along with people is important. Being passionate about service and education is a must. Regardless what your own personality is like, those have got to be things that are at your core. You believe in the power of education and why it's important for people, but also service and treating people with kindness and respect and understanding. Leadership, people often look to you for decision making, for guidance. Having some leadership skills incredibly important. Energetic, and I put in brackets stubborn. I am a high energy person, and I find that really helps me in this role, because you just got to keep going. But I also am very stubborn, so I refuse to quit. So I'd say it's a combination of the two. Optimistic, especially in times like we're in right now, being optimistic is helpful. It's better to look at, how things can go well, and to kind of aim for the things that we hope for. One of the sayings that we say in our office often is, you plan for the worst, but you hope for the best. This kind of ensures that you've got all angles covered, and you're prepared if things don't go the way that you hope that they do, but we always hope that they go the best way possible. Policy driven. Until I entered post-secondary, I wouldn't have thought that I was a rule follower. I think my parents would have been like, yes, you are a rule follower. Now I know that I am. Education and especially the portfolios that I look after are very driven by policy. So essentially rules that need to be applied to make sure that things were equitable and fair. So being policy driven is important. And work ethic. Again, it's a very busy job. Lots of jobs are, but having good work ethic will help guide you through. A little bit about where I'm employed. I'm employed again at the University of Lethbridge. We are located in southern Alberta. It's a medium-sized university. We have about 9,000 students, 2 different campuses. The majority of students attend our institution in Lethbridge, but we do have a Calgary campus as well. We are a liberal education institution, so essentially we offer tons and tons of different programs that help prepare you for specific careers, but we also have like a global citizenship type of twist on all of our programs, and we call that liberal education. So essentially when you graduate, we hope that you are A, prepared for your future careers, but B, also a better global citizen. We have 6 different faculties, so we offer a ton of different types of programming. We also have graduate studies, so that's masters and PhDs. We are well known nationally for our undergraduate research and student services. And student services is the area that I work in, so we're very proud of that. And we're also the largest employer in the city of Lethbridge. Equipment. I don't use a lot of equipment. So I've shown pictures of the 3 things that I rely on the most. I rely on my brain, I rely on my computer, and I rely on speaking. Those are really the only things that are necessary for me to be able to do my job. The rewards of my job. I think there's a lot of different rewards, I should say that. One of them is implementing new projects and seeing them be successful and making a difference for people. For example, one of the projects that we just launched in our department is we're the very first Canadian school to launch what's called a digital parchment wallet, or a digital credential wallet on a Canadian platform. So essentially, our students, when they graduate, can now go into this digital wallet and access their parchment, and in the future their transcripts, and potentially in the future other documents that they can keep and access at any time that they want. So that was really, really rewarding, in that we got to be one of the first Canadian schools ever to launch on this idea, but the first Canadian school to launch on the Canadian platform. Building relationships is also really rewarding, and specifically it's rewarding for me. I like to feel connected to people, and I feel that I do better work when I'm connected to people. So every time I build upon a new relationship or expand an existing relationship is incredibly rewarding to me. Learning. There's the old cliche of people that are lifelong learners. But I really feel that way, and I really believe in that. It's really humbling to understand when you don't know everything. So when you start to pick the brains of all of the wonderful people around you, and you start to pick up lessons from them and knowledge from them, that's incredibly, incredibly rewarding. And then the last one I think is the most obvious one: career promotions and opportunities, doors opening. When you work really hard, things can just happen. And so I think that no matter your career or what path you take in life, if we're working really hard, doors can open for us. And so that's also very, very rewarding. Challenges. Not knowing everything, like I touched on in the last slide, is really challenging. In this role, I have to make really quick decisions, and sometimes about controversial things. And when you don't have the context for absolutely everything, my style is certainly to consult with people and to gather different perspectives so that I can make the best decision with the information that I have. And sometimes when there isn't time to kind of look at all the different angles, that's challenging for me. Politics are challenging. I think this is probably challenging everywhere. And I'm not necessarily just talking about federal or provincial politics, but internal politics as well. Post-secondary is interesting because there's very traditional ways of kind of, I guess, hierarchy. We have lots of different groups of employers in our institution. And being an institution that grants degrees and grants masters and PhDs, it's kind of almost like a natural hierarchy that's built right in. And sometimes that can be a bit challenging to work with because I am working with a lot of different people with different backgrounds, different skills, different education levels, and sometimes people with no education levels. And so trying to kind of maneuver all of those things can be really political, which is very, very challenging. And then the last point that you'll see is making everyone happy. I would say a fault of mine, but also something positive about me is that I really, really just like people to be happy. It makes me happy to know that people are happy, but I know realistically in my job that I can't always do that. Some decisions that are made or things that we do, maybe aren't going to work for some people. And that's challenging because you essentially want things to be great for everybody. So a little of the nitty gritty of the job. So at our institution, and it varies a little bit at different institutions in Canada, folks in these roles will typically make between $77,000 and $97,000 annually. And with those pay numbers, you'll often see when you look at job descriptions, a lot of where you will land in those ranges depends on the level of education that you have and your work experience. So the more experience you have, the higher up on that scale potentially you'll land, and same with education. Often a mix of both kind of sets you up to be higher on that scale. However, if you do come in lower on that scale, through more experience, you may see that those numbers increase. I'm very fortunate in my role. I have full benefits. So my health and dental, my eyes, everything's covered under my benefits. And we have some really interesting perks as well. We've got wellness and health spending accounts. So things like gym memberships, or if I like to golf, I can get golf equipment. I can get a new pair of runners, anything that's going to help aid in my personal wellness and health. We've got a really generous spending account for that. We have professional supplements. So if we want to go back to school, get another degree or work on a master's, or if we're doing professional development, we've got a professional supplement that helps aid that. We've got really cool things like computer buyback plans and phone plans, where you can purchase perhaps like a laptop for your own personal use, and the university covers it, and then you actually just have a buyback plan where you pay the university back with little to no interest. So really great perks to being an employee at the university. I also am fortunate that I collect a full pension through the university academic pension plan. In my role, I have approximately 4 to 5 weeks of vacation time per year. This is due partially to the type of role that I'm in, but also because of my work experience at the university. So I've worked there for 7 years, almost 7 years. So, so the longer you work at a place, the more vacation time you earn. My typical workday is between 8:30 and 4:30. One of the things though with an upper management job is that there's a different expectation on your work. So the expectation isn't necessarily that you work from 8:30 to 4:30 all the time. If you've got work that needs to be done and we've got lots of kind of pressing timelines and deadlines and expectations, the expectation is just to get the job done. So there is often overtime that is needed, or just extra work that's got to be, we have to find time for. So some of the expected, actually, sorry, education, let me backtrack a little bit. So some of the things that are expected out of your education for a role like this, completion of high school, so grades that are high enough to get into a university program. There isn't a specific type of education program that may be appropriate for this. So, oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, thought that I heard something there. But high enough grades to get into a university program anyways. A bachelor's degree is necessary for employment in this line of work. So a bachelor's degree, typically a 4-year degree. Having a master's is a benefit, but not necessary. I don't have a master's degree. Knowledge of student information systems are a benefit. And also any kind of non-credit certification that you can get, any professional development also helps with getting and maintaining jobs such as this one. So my own personal educational path has been a little bit different and has kind of ebbed and flowed throughout the years. So I, of course, completed my high school diploma. I was an honor roll student, but I wasn't top of the list. So I was maybe like a mid-80s student at the highest. I first received a diploma in advertising and public relations at Lethbridge College, so in the same city that I live in now, just a different post-secondary education or institution. After I finished that diploma, quite a bit of uncertainty about what I wanted to do after that. I thought about going to U of C to do a communications degree, thought about getting into education, but I didn't bite at either of those. I still wasn't totally sure. So after a few years, I began a degree in professional arts with a major in communications. I did do the degree online, so I can relate to a lot of students, high school students and college and university students that are doing their schooling online. But I did do my entire degree online. I have a major in communications. And then I have a it's a certificate in policy development and implementation that I did through St. Mary's University in Halifax. It's not like a bachelor's degree. It's not like a master's. It's kind of just a non-credit certificate that I wanted to gain more knowledge in a specific niche area of study. It definitely applies to the job that I'm doing now. And over the years, I've had tons and tons of professional and personal development courses. Some have been relative to my work, some were just for interest. But I think that all of them have played some sort of role in developing my skills to prepare me for a job like this. So I really am a sucker for things like Strength Finders, which is kind of a personal evaluation tool that helps you discover what your strengths are in the workforce. And I like to do that actually every few years, just to see how things have changed with knowledge and maturity. I've done different types of training in wellness, in student wellness or personal wellness. I've had some really interesting opportunities in my work life, and did some training in wind energy in Colorado. Just really cool random things that have just all given me a broader knowledge base, and has helped develop some skills that are all really helpful to me today. A little more detail about my personal journey to getting to where I am now. My intent with getting a diploma in public relations and advertising was that I was pretty sure that I was going to end up working in a high rise in a really big city and making tons of money. But I think after having moved away from home and having had to all of a sudden be an adult, I realized that these things sounded glamorous, but they really weren't for me. They weren't really what I wanted. And so there things kind of unfolded, and I had to do a lot of searching to figure out what's my right path, what do I want to do. My first job out of college was doing marketing for a local car dealership. And although I had some great experiences, I knew immediately that that's not what I wanted to do. I got very fortunate. About a year after that job, one of my college instructors called me and said, "Hey, Lethbridge College is looking to hire for this specific position. I think you should apply." So thank God she called me, because that was really what kickstarted my entire career in education. Education always was the goal for me, but I was really confused on what that meant. My perception as a teenager and a young adult was that if I'm going to work in education, I need to be a teacher. And I grew up with a teacher in my house, and I've always had the utmost respect for educators, but wasn't really sure if it was what I wanted to do. I like to public speak. I like people to listen to me. I like to share information, but I just wasn't sure that that was right. But I knew deep down that education was important to me. And so that's kind of stuck with me my whole life. So once I started working at the college, I moved through multiple roles. So I started doing marketing for the business program. And in that, I did a little bit of recruiting. And then I needed to kind of help fill a different role. And it would happen to be within our wind energy academy, which is what got me to Colorado to do this really cool training. I was the first Canadian to ever have received that training. So it was a really, really great experience. Again, was renewable resources the avenue I was interested in? No, but it was linked to education, which was still on the right path. Through there, I moved into recruiting. And so I got to drive all over Western Canada for a few years, going to high schools, talking to students, doing things, again, that were really hitting some of those things that were important to me, but I wasn't an educator. I wasn't a teacher. So things are still kind of, moving in the right direction. And I'm test driving lots of different things. Eventually I became the manager of the recruitment team. And that was the last role that I had at Lethbridge College. I think I'd come to a point where I was maybe growing out of that role and wasn't sure what I wanted to do. There wasn't any opportunities for me there at that time in terms of any more career development or growth, or even just job opportunities that were available. So I started to look across the river at the university and see what was there. I took a really big chance and applied for a calendar editor role. So the calendar is the academic calendar, and it's really the legislation and the policy that covers all of the programs that we offer. And I thought it sounded really dry, but I really was kind of in a spot where I need change. I need to have different scenery. I need some new challenges. So I applied for it and got it. I was surprised. I didn't expect to be the successful candidate, but was fortunate to be chosen. And then that's really what the launching pad has been for my journey to this spot now. So through it all, through my 14 years of working in post-secondary education so far, I've really found that I've been able to kind of feed that passion for education. And now I know that it doesn't mean that I don't have to set foot in a classroom to help educators make that difference. I can be behind the scenes to help educators, deliver and develop the best education to students. And I get to be on that service side too, making sure that students' needs are being met. And that's just incredibly fulfilling. And it's, even though I didn't intend or mean to end up where I am now, it's exactly where I want to be. So I've been really, really fortunate. And I think that I know that this isn't my last job. I have quite a few years of work ahead of me still. So I can't imagine that I would stay in this job for that long, and that's okay. But I do know that this job is going to be another great launching point for me someday. Whether I stay in education, if I move to the private sector, if maybe I move to K-12 education, I've got myself to a place where I can maneuver to a lot of different areas. So that's a really exciting notion for me. But I do know that even though this might not be my last job, this is my career. The opportunities for roles like this. So to be really honest with you, they're kind of slim pickings. There aren't many registrars, assistant registrars in the institution. So our institution has 1 registrar and 3 assistant registrars. And some schools have more, some have less. And so that doesn't leave a whole lot of jobs kind of up for grabs there. However, I think that if you are like me and you're passionate about education, this isn't necessarily the one job you've got to aim for. I think that there's lots of different areas in education that you can work. So if you're looking at it more vaguely or broadly, there's lots more opportunity for education. If you're looking at it narrowly, not a bunch. Post-secondary jobs often come in waves. So a lot of it will depend on budgets. A lot of it will depend on government. A lot of it will depend on programming. So there are ebbs and flows with employment at post-secondaries, as there are with all publicly funded institutions. So it does come in waves. Advancement is really common. One of the things that we like to do at the University of Lethbridge is grow our people. So when we obtain really great, talented employees, our goal is to give them skills and to coach them so that they can continue to advance their career in our institution. We like homegrown people, and that doesn't mean you're from Lethbridge. I'm not from Lethbridge, but we nurture the people that come to us to work, and we celebrate and take pride in people advancing their careers. This occupation itself can lead to lots of different things. So I think the most obvious one is the registrar, but that isn't necessarily the job that all people in this role will want. But it does set you up for employment, other employment in post-secondary at different institutions, or in the private sector as well. And anything that's related, I've kind of touched upon that already. Really anything that's in education, specifically on the non-academic side. So again, not being an instructor or professor, you've kind of got your hand in a lot of different pots. So once you're in the education system, movement laterally or up is quite common. And we're all related to one another somehow. Work-life balance is an interesting one. So one of the things with being in the upper management level is that the expectation is that the job gets done. So sometimes that balance has to shift. For the most part, we really, really are supported in making sure that we're balanced. Healthy employees, mentally and physically healthy employees, are going to be more productive. And so we really, really promote the idea of work-life balance. And I, as an employee, feel that. I feel very supported by my colleagues, by my bosses, and by the institution in general to make sure that I'm maintaining a balance. A lot of these jobs can be incredibly high stress, so that balance is critical. Like I said, the balance can be really difficult at times, but it ebbs and flows. The other thing that's great too is that working parents are supported, or if you've got dependents, even maybe older dependents, or siblings, those things are supported without question. So I, as a mom, again, feel very fortunate that my employees understand that my family is my priority. And that also helps with my production at work, because I don't have to worry about what's happening with my family, because I'm allowed to take care of all of my family matters. But I do think that work-life balance is something that it's a standard that you have to set for yourself. And you have to keep yourself accountable for your job and your personal life. So I do think that work-life balance takes practice. Often it takes a lot of trial and error. You know, and sometimes it takes some people to kind of hit that wall and experience a little bit of that burnout to realize that this balance is incredibly important. So a lot of work-life balance is practice. And for some advice, and really it's just my perspective, so you can take it or leave it. But one of the things that I've learned over the last few years that really stuck with me is to surround yourself with smart, capable people. So one of my professional development opportunities was to go see Barack Obama speak in Calgary a few years ago. And love him or hate him, that's not the point. But he had a lot of really wise antidotes to share. And this was one of the things that I took away that will stick with me for the rest of my life, is that if you don't know all the answers, but you are surrounded by smart, capable people, you as a team will find the answers. And I live and breathe by that. That's how I operate. That's how I like my teams to operate. And I think that it's just incredibly helpful. Another one is being humble. I think that there's nothing better than letting people know that you're human. So when you admit that you don't know something or that you've made a mistake, I actually think that that helps people trust you, and also helps people understand that you're just not a machine. You know, you've got learning and growing to do as well. So being humble can be difficult sometimes for some people, but is incredibly important. Being kind, I think this kind of goes with the be humble part. We have, again, we're the largest employer in Lethbridge, so there's a lot of people at our institution. And you never really know what kind of day someone's having or what kind of things are going on in their lives outside of work. And although this conversation we're having today is mostly about work, that small statement is going to get you really far in work. And then prioritizing your work-life balance, setting that standard for yourself is so important. And that doesn't matter what line of work you're in. Making sure that you know what your personal priorities are and finding a way to allow your career, your work to align with those. Because that's what's going to make you productive. It's what's going to make you happy. It's what's going to keep your passion on fire. So I think that those pieces are really important. And those are the things I've learned the most throughout my career so far. And that's that. I welcome any questions if there are any.
I want to thank you, Kendra. That was an awesome presentation. I think the biggest takeaway that I'm looking at this from your presentation is you acknowledging that broad-based education, because as a student looking at this career, they think, well, no, you don't know if they'll ever work their way into a position like this, but you never know, right? And the connections that you make along the way literally will open doors for you. And thank you so much for addressing that and the advice that you've given to students. That's great.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Kendra, I got a more specific question. Your benefits and stuff like that. You mentioned before to me one other time, you mentioned to me about, is there a children's education part of the benefits?
Yeah, there is. So yeah, that's actually a big one. So employees of the university that have dependent children, they're able to access education for no tuition. So we would pay for books and fees, but the tuition of the courses is waived. So yeah, so having 3 young children, that's if they choose to go to the university, that would be great.
Yeah, that could be, yes.
It could be.
I'm not sure, is any have any other questions? If there's no other questions, Kendra, I'd like to thank you for this. I think, again, like Renette said, it's kind of, sometimes we don't set out on a path from high school to necessarily become an assistant registrar, but I think you kind of highlighted pretty clearly that sometimes it's the journey and where, you know, you never know where it's going to take you. That you don't have to necessarily have your life mapped out in front of you when you're 16, 17, 18 years old.
Yeah, no, yeah, thank you. One of the things I learned as a recruiter and talking directly with high school students for years is that they often feel like they have to know. And I will tell you that the person you are when you're 16, 17, 18 is not the person you're going to be when you're in your 20s and your 30s and your 40s. And so that evolution is okay and it's great, but education really is that jumping point for you. And not for everyone. I know many people that don't have post-secondary education who've been very successful. And so it really depends on what your goals are and the idea of how you'd like your career to be. Maybe the specifics aren't you don't have to know those things when you're so young, because half of the learning comes through your experience as an adult anyways.
That's right. Well, thank you very much, Kendra. We've had a couple other people that said just are thanking you. They're giving you on the chat box, just thanking you for your presentation. They really liked it. So well done. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.